Hey y'all, how are you doing? I'm great. Thank you so much for asking. It's me, Kim, and I'm back for another video. Let's talk about Black women in luxury. If you're a Black woman on the internet, chances are you've seen images and videos of, quote, Black women in luxury. It's an idea, it's a slogan, it's a hashtag that's created dozens of social media accounts. There's literally thousands of posts under it. I've even seen people call it a movement. If you click, you'll see Black women decked out in designer clothes, unboxing expensive items, lounging in exotic locales, or eating at fancy restaurants, right? With the hashtag Black women in luxury or Black women deserve luxury appended. And that luxury is extremely homogenous. It is the classy kind of luxury with all the baggage that that term contains, right? So it's almost exclusively thin, feminine presenting, heavily made up women, or if they're barefaced, they have perfect complexions, flawless skin, not a hair out of place. And these images are supposed to be decidedly aspirational. They're meant to show us what we could achieve if we just reject self-sacrifice and struggle love. And look, I'm not gonna lie, the stuff is fun to look at. I follow a couple of those accounts, right? So we always say representation matters. So of course, it's going to be enjoyable to see brown-skinned and dark-skinned women living the high life. But as much fun as it is, I do have some concerns about the way that we engage in this movement. So let's take a second to talk about where Black women in luxury stems from and where it falls flat. It's taken me a few months to work through my feelings on this discourse because, one, I live a very self-indulgent life and I don't want to be a hypocrite. And two, as I mentioned in the Lizzo video, things that are aesthetic for other communities are existential for ours. So I'm not really judging. We all deserve grace. I can't tell you don't want a Birkin bag without first excavating the source of that desire. And I wouldn't even tell you don't want a Birkin bag. It's unrealistic and classist to chastise people for wanting signifiers of wealth in a society that values people based on those signifiers. But hopefully, after this conversation, we, and I do mean we, because I really struggle with this, can reevaluate our relationship to the procurement and the performance of, quote, luxury. Because instead of leaning into the idea that Black women's lives are validated by our ability to access and display things that are intentionally unobtainable, we have to acknowledge that these individual pursuits of superficial comfort will never amount to a mass movement to better the lives of all Black women. That's my primary beef with this whole thing. It's so individualistic. It's easier to stunt than to focus on creating the conditions that would better all of our lives. That takes collective struggle. And most of us just don't want to commit to it, or we feel like we can't commit to it. I know that there's going to be backlash to this. I know people do not want to have a critical conversation. They're going to call me a miserable, just enjoy it. It's not political. I get it. But it is political. It's very obviously political, you guys. That's why people are calling it a movement. That's why people are saying that these images are revolutionary, because we understand that our bodies, our beings, the way that we show up, it's political. And hopefully this reevaluation can help us be kinder, gentler, less judgmental to ourselves and to each other. What a relief it could be to see that, like, living our best life doesn't have to look that way, that it can be as quiet or as loud as we'd like. How do we get here? It's complicated. First, the Black women in luxury discourse is absolutely an outgrowth of the perversion of Audre Lorde's writing on self-care. She wrote, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare." For context, Audre Lorde wrote that in 1988. And she was not talking about bubble baths or shopping sprees. She was talking about having the ability to take care of herself while she was being treated for cancer. She was documenting the inherent unfairness that she, as a Black lesbian woman, was battling heterosexist, misogynistic, white supremacist, classist structures while battling breast cancer. Over time, the systemic analysis has been completely extracted from Lorde's writing. Now it's been transformed into an endorsement of consumption-based wellness that just reproduces the structures that she was railing against. And by the way, I'm not pathologizing Black women here. This is also about the gooped out white women's wellness movement that's become a multi-million-dollar industry. Is it wrong to treat yourself to a latte or an expensive handbag or a weekend retreat? No, of course not. Take care of yourself. Self-actualization is actually a good thing, something that we've been denied. So even if I don't think that this is the way to get there, I completely understand why so many Black women would flock to the idea of Black women in luxury. We're traumatized intergenerationally. Even if you as a Black woman have been able to escape being overworked, exploited, commodified, you absolutely know a Black woman who has. She's in your community, she's in your family, right? She gives everything of herself. She had no choice. Reading a book about the mammy archetype from the 20th century crystallized for me why so many of us go so far out of our way to say, nope, I'm not that. And ain't never gonna be that. That's why I'm so grateful to be the age that I am, because so many Black women, generations X, Y, and Z, know that we deserve happiness and joy and love and fun and rest. So we're reacting. We're trying to reset and reframe. We want to feel good and whole and human. I understand why luxury makes us feel more human, but it shouldn't have that power. And it only has that power because all of these social forces are organized to grind us into dust, to make us feel lowly and unworthy. But again, do whatever you want. Go wherever you want. Run it up. I'm just trying to reframe here. And finally, we have to talk about the influence of social media. My feelings about social media are decidedly mixed. These platforms cater to our worst and most pleasure-seeking impulses, and that's why they become the venue for wealth theater. These performances telegraph your social status. Think about the logic of unboxings and hauls. Think about trying to explain what a haul is to an alien. That's me getting my Derek Bell on. Think about trying to explain sitting and watching a stranger unbox something you will never have access to. Like, it makes no sense. How much of our enjoyment of expensive things is rooted in our ability to show them? I was listening to a podcast where the subject for the week was Black luxury. And I remember one of the presenters saying, well, just mind your business. Don't say anything, mind your business. And I'm like, we can't mind our business. Performances need audiences. That's the exchange, right? They get to get their shit off. And I say they, I mean me, because I've done it. But the audience is necessary for brand and narrative building. And that's why the fetishization of representation is so harmful, because it leads us to pretend like seeing a single Black woman unboxing an Hermes Kelly is a win for all Black women, when that is not true. Hyper-consumerist culture does not suddenly become liberatory when we do it. Let's talk about the performance, because I admit I do have beef with how narrow the acceptable performance of luxury is. The adulation comes not just from being able to buy the stuff, but in how you display it. So a lot of this is not about fun and freedom and ease. It's about good old-fashioned class anxiety. Pierre Bourdieu tells us that there are many forms of capital, and some matter more than others, depending on what your aims are. So your relative social status depends on your cultural capital. For example, even if you can afford it, even if you have the money, do you have taste? Are you tacky? Are you doing too much? Can you find the perfect balance between ostentation and refinement? Again, that's more class-coded language, but that's important. And that's why somebody like Akeisha Kaur, am I pronouncing that woman's name right? But y'all know Gucci Mane's wife. That woman with her closet full of designer clothes and bust down Audemars Piguet watches doesn't fit the aesthetic, even if we know she's rich as hell, has every designer handbag out there, and likely doesn't have to lift a finger around her home. She does not fit the aesthetic because you can be rich and seen to embody, quote, low classness. And that's where all those anti-Black pejoratives come in. Ghetto, hood, that's that. So the thing about the Black woman in luxury stuff is it reifies that stratification between the good Black woman who knows how to carry herself, who knows how to do it right, and everyone else, right? Only some Black women get to be lifted up and celebrated. Only some Black women are aspirational. So that's how we know the movement is not really about being carefree. It's about celebrating how well you can adhere to dominant norms. And generally those norms are structured by whiteness. And in order to do it right, you gotta care a lot. Furthermore, when I see these displays of wealth posited as a win for all Black women, I can only think about how the vast majority of us do not have access to these kinds of performances and will not. And I know people are gonna take issue with the will not part of that sentence, so here's where I have to run down the financial realities of Black women in the United States. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median earnings for all Black women is $768. For women my age, I'm 32, it's $810. That's less than $40,000 a year. And median means half of Black women earn more and half earn less. Black women are twice as likely as white women to be their family's primary breadwinner. Almost 30% of Black female-headed households live below the poverty line. Not to mention, this is gonna start off some crazy stuff in the comments, I know. But not to mention that if you are a Black woman who desires to partner a man, the main way that so many other women raise their financial status, raise their social position, is through marriage. Marriage does not work like that for us. Not when we're partnering Black men. I know that's gonna be controversial, but that's the truth. There's lots of data on that. We only have a fraction of the wealth of white women, and most of us have no retirement savings. So it's bad. It's really bad, you guys. And before folks come over here accusing me of having a poverty mindset, I have to say, poverty is not a mindset. Poverty is a political choice. It's the result of repeated, ongoing structural failure. It's not your fault. I'm not gonna bullshit y'all. Buying things is fun. It's fun to spend money. But unless you're rich, like rich, and to me, rich is like having $10 million or more, you're just not gonna be able to buy your way out of the ways of the world, right? Like you're gonna have to deal with it. There are millions of people in this country who live well above the poverty line, who still live check to check. Most Americans don't have $500 in a savings account, and Black women make up a disproportionate number of those people. Even the Black women who make a good amount of money are teetering on the brink, right? Still swimming against the tide because of outsized financial responsibilities and burdens, right? And if you have a lack of generational wealth, you are the safety net. Now, I've gone viral a couple of times saying what I believe and what is true, which is that Black people don't have money. And I say that all the time because we don't. Okay, like the numbers are clear, so why are we faking it? Social media is filled with a bunch of people making maybe $70,000 a year. And by the way, if you make $70,000 a year, you're doing very well in the United States, but you are not on easy street. At all. So why are a bunch of people who are maybe upper middle class if you live in Oklahoma, maybe, why do we spend so much time talking about what broke people should and should not do? We're lying to ourselves and we're lying to each other. If I have a bad day, I'm broke again. Not only that, if I have a bad day, my mom is broke again. My sister might be broke again because they have to pour their resources into me. That's how this cycle works. And we'll all likely experience financial ups and downs because we're not rich. So if you are basing your humanity on what you can afford, what you can buy, what happens when you can't buy that stuff anymore? Are you less human? What happens if you are never able to buy that stuff in the first place? Are you ever human? The logic says yeah. And let's take a little detour here because I want to be really real about the things that I've learned the hard way. Just because you can buy something does not mean you can afford it. Now, I'm not shaming you. I'm not telling you what to do with your money. I keep saying this because this is really true. I can only talk about what I've learned from fucking off a lot of money and the struggles that I see other people going through. Do you have multiple forms of insurance? Do you own things that are not depreciating assets? Do you have retirement accounts? I have for years had a terrible, irresponsible relationship to money because I was trying to buy self-esteem like a lot of us are. And this year just got back on track to where I feel like I can just like breathe a little bit. Recently, I took a good 5 or 6 weeks off. I was going through the stages of grief. I was down extremely bad. Got a new therapist and everything, right? But during that time, I was never once worried about how I was going to pay my bills. If I was living on the edge of my means the way that I've done for most of my adult life, I wouldn't have been able to take that time. I would have had to force myself to cry and work. And I recognize that's what most people have to do. So as soon as I got a little bit of cushion, again, because I've fucked off my money before, but when I got a little bit more money again, I decided to start preparing. And this is only something that you can do when you have cushion. I get it. But I wanted to be prepared because I know things happen. And when I was talking to my therapist about what I'm grateful for, because I keep a gratitude journal, it's really important for me. The number one thing was that I did not have to be productive. I woke up focused every single day on feeling better, taking care of myself, getting back on track. I wasn't worried about no damn YSL bags. I wasn't worried about no Giuseppe Zanotti shoes. I was worried about, am I gonna get through it? Am I going to be okay? If I was doing what I used to do, I wouldn't have been able to get off the treadmill long enough to take care of myself. If you have the capacity, are you setting yourself up to be able to withstand the vicissitudes of life? Again, I know this is a privileged girl conversation, privileged as hell. But if you have it, how are you allocating those funds? For real. But after that experience, I don't go, oh my God, like I'm just so glad I have that. I think, how can we get that for everyone? So yeah, it does worry me that when we're already doing so poorly, that consumption gets promoted as liberty. I think we have this very common temptation to view things that make us feel good as things that are liberatory or transgressive. But the Black women in luxury stuff, is not that. In fact, is the opposite of that. What is transgressive about images of Black women, most of whom really don't have assets like that, participating in a hyper-consumerist, materialistic culture? That seems like a very old racist trope to me. I really hope that all these conversations about wealth and money and luxury are encouraging people to take a look at the financial system. Because I wonder if all of this brouhaha about normal people accessing luxury is also about worsening wealth inequality. This might be a conspiracy theory, but stick with me here. There's no way it's an accident that after a year and a half of pandemic life, with more wealth inequality than we've seen in a century, literally wealth inequality in 2021 is almost as bad as it was in the late 1920s. With greater socioeconomic precarity for millennials and Gen Z, it can't be an accident that the spectacle of wealth has become a movement. As the middle class gets hollowed out, it becomes increasingly difficult for regular, normal people to live just a good life. So that's why people get consumed with amassing as much as possible and mimicking the lives of the only group for whom the pandemic was just a minor inconvenience, rich people. And I'm not going to say we all deserve to be rich. It's just not even possible. But we all deserve to be well cared for. And for far too many of us, we see that the only way to be well cared for, to get rest and relaxation on a regular basis, is to acquire enormous wealth. The catch is, if happiness is tied to what you can consume, there's no end. It's an interminable cycle. For one, because the goalposts of luxury are constantly moving based on who has access to what at any given moment. Now, I remember when I was a kid, Michael Kors, Coach, Dooney and Burke, those were the aspirational brands. Now, teenagers would scoff if you gave them a Coach purse. Teenagers would laugh you out of the building if you gave them a Michael Kors wristlet. What has changed? Access. And no, I don't think that this escapism is harmless, because escapism shapes our desires and the content of our desires shapes our lives. After I did that Squid Game video, y'all told me to read up on Buddhist philosophy because I inadvertently repeated a central tenet of it. I said that desire is the source of all suffering, and it turns out I'm not the first person to come up with that idea. But it's true, materialism begets materialism. If you can internalize all these images and not feel any pressure whatsoever, congratulations, you're tougher than me. You're tougher than most people, actually, because that's just generally not how our psychology works. I've had the experience of you climb up one rung and then you immediately start thinking about, how do I get to the next rung? Or you buy a nice thing and you immediately start thinking about, oh, but what's the next thing? Happens all the time. That's how we get roped into this unending cycle of lifestyle creep, where the freedom to buy quickly turns into captivity via our own desires. Conspicuous consumption is the opposite of rest. These systems we're trying to escape depend on our overexertion, but they're also dependent on our continued quest for more and better. We're not supposed to say, this is good enough. I have enough. I don't need more stuff. We're never supposed to feel good about where we are. And I don't think desire is wrong. Desire just is. But I do think that our desires can lead us to do ethically dubious things. I do think that our desires can lead us to do things that put ourselves or others in harm's way. We're developing another kind of dysmorphia. The same way that constantly consuming images of surgically altered bodies and faces makes you question your own body and face, constantly consuming images of wealth makes you question your own status, your own place in the world. There's a great video on this by Adela Afadi. I highly encourage you to watch it. What does it mean to normalize things that are intentionally inaccessible? I grew up in the roaring 90s, right? The era of shiny suit bad boy and the pop bottles era of Rockefeller. And it all felt so absurd. It felt like a caricature. I remember watching VH1. They had this show called Lifestyles of the Rich and the Famous. And it was narrated by Robin Leach. And everything he would talk about was so big, so crazy, so ridiculous. They'd be like, do you believe Jennifer Lopez pays $200 for 1 ounce of La Mer? Do you believe that Beyonce gets champagne facials? And then we were supposed to be like, what the fuck? These people are crazy. But now we're all supposed to want that. So how in the world can you normalize excess? You can't. What you can do is normalize the insecurity that stems from not being able to access it. What you can do is normalize the shame that you internalize when you see other people have stuff you feel like you deserve. Now look, I know I went off on my little aside earlier, but I do not want to advocate individual solutions to structural problems. The only way we're going to get out of this is if there's a huge societal shift, if there's a huge transformation. So what is your orientation towards justice? I know a lot of us have embraced individualism that borders on hedonism because our systems are failing us, right? The electoral system sucks. We see activists and organizers out here being killed, being jailed, being imprisoned. It seems like too much of a sacrifice. I get that. But what are our options? I wanted to sit down and think through this because it's easy and preferable if you participate in the reproduction of these images to be like, I'm not hurting anybody. It doesn't matter. But that's not true. Luxury does not just require elitism and classism. Luxury requires exploitation and exclusion. Consumption is not a politically neutral act. Now, here's an extreme example, and I know y'all gonna argue about this in the comments, but whatever. Remember the uproar over Jay-Z and Beyonce and the Tiffany diamond? So the Carters had this historic partnership with Tiffany and Company where Beyonce was gonna be the first Black woman to ever wear the Tiffany diamond. And we were supposed to say, oh my God, first Black woman, Tiffany diamond, this is amazing luxury. But then the Black South Africans came and were like, that shit is stolen, you need to give it back. Right? The luxury is because of the theft, not despite. The luxury is because this historic, storied brand refused to be associated with blackness for over 180 years. And then they cracked the door open and we're supposed to go crazy because they let 2 billionaires in. It's giving desperation, you guys. It's giving desperate for white validation. We are supposed to bask in that, but it's sad. And I don't want this to be like a referendum on the Carters. I don't even really care about that. I'm not particularly mad at that. I'm also not particularly mad at us for falling into the trap, but we should be really clear-eyed about what's happening here. Y'all, this is where I'm gonna have to be really serious because I know people are going to try to misrepresent what I'm saying here. So please, I'm begging you, please do not accuse me of only wanting to see Black women suffer. That is not the case. I want to see all Black women of all complexions, of all sizes, of all income levels, of all education levels, live their best lives, live vibrantly, limitless abundance, as Kelly would say, right? Like the top of the top. But I cannot dictate what that looks like for you. And I don't think that we should try to box ourselves in. And I know that for my life, I want to enjoy my life without trying to prove how much better than everybody else I'm doing. Or without trying to feel like I have to brag all the time because I did it the right way. You know, look how I did it. But that's hard. It is hard and I fail all the time. I'm trying to do and be better. As Audre Lorde said, if what we're talking about is feminism, then the personal is political and we can subject everything in our lives to scrutiny. So I'm scrutinizing. And I'll be honest with y'all. If I was at a different point in my life, I would not make this video. Not at all. If I was still Kim sitting on the floor of my Oklahoma City apartment, I would never do this because I know the first comments would be, you're broke, you're jealous, you just wish you could. And I'm a little bit buffered from that now, but that shit hurts. I'm not impervious to it. And I only have this perspective because I have been broke. Look, scroll back. This is the challenge, right? Scroll back in the videos, okay? Scroll back to 2016 when I was sitting on the floor of a $700 a month apartment. That's what informs the way that I move now. I've said time and again that leisure is luxury for me, but leisure is not tied to my ability to spend money. Leisure is the ability to be still and not worry about money, not worry about what's coming in or what's going out, not worry about who's watching or who isn't watching. And that's a mixture of enormous privilege, but also I do carefully and strategically craft my life so that I don't have to chase every check. I will loop in my beloved project manager, Ashley, on this because she knows if Kimberly don't want to work, Kimberly not working. And that means I leave a lot of money on the table. But I always get to pay attention to my health and happiness, right? Like that's the trade-off. But that means that I do have to pay a lot of attention to what I am saving and what I'm investing, and that I cannot get caught up in the treat yourself trap. Now, I do treat myself a lot because I like nice things. I deserve nice things. You deserve nice things. But I've made peace with the fact that there are things that I will never have. And that's not me surrendering to low expectations. I still have so many goals. There's so many things that I want to accomplish, but I am refusing to spend my days consumed by my desires. We can all agree that every single Black woman deserves respite from the cruelty of misogynoir, but trying to repackage the same old materialism using social justice language is just not it. We need rest. Rest is expensive. It costs way more than an IG photo shoot. It is much easier to get a Chanel bag than it is to gather the support and resources necessary to take a break whenever you need it. Can you take time to yourself? If sustained rest is not available to you, which you definitely should not internalize as a personal failure, why is that? What structures need to be built up so that you can get that? What cultural interventions do we need to normalize that? It makes me sad that so many of us will not be able to do what Naomi Osaka did or Simone Biles did, which is simply opt out, right? Like if you feel like something is putting your mind or your body at risk, you just walk away. Most of us can't do that because we don't have fuck you money. Too many of us are subject to the whims of coercive employers and unhealthy work environments. Or women who know that it's their labor that's keeping their families or their communities together. They can't just walk away. And that shouldn't be. I'm just gonna ask that we spend as much time thinking about the changes that need to be made to save lives as we do thinking about the changes that need to be made to our aesthetic representation. Of course, Black women deserve luxury, but we deserve so much more than that. Well, that's all I have to say about that, you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. Hit me up on Instagram or Twitter. Thank you to the patrons. Thank you to the members. I appreciate you so much. That's it. Tell me what I should talk about next. I'll see you next time. Bye.